10 minutes apiece, and go when you're ready.
I am not here, first of all, to say that teaching your kid flat earth is not a bad idea or is not harmful. But there is a legal and I think a moral distinction between mis or maltreatment and abuse. And at one end, we have things that are harmful to a child, but generally do not rise to the level of needing an intervention from a state authority. And at the other end, we have child abuse that is so severe that it is grounds for removal of that child from the home immediately. So, I think that teaching someone flat earth per se generally falls below the level of something that should result in a removal from the home. And for me, child abuse is things that can, on their own, provided they are not corrected or changed, are things that can lead to removal of the child. And so, for me, teaching flat earth per se is not that. However, it could contribute to things like child abuse. I will not pretend that it couldn't contribute to educational neglect or something like that. Now, I plan to get more into educational neglect in my rebuttal because I did not prepare a whole lot about it, and so this is still my opening. So, one of the things I want to emphasize is that we do not have any real statistics on what happens to children who are raised believing in flat earth. Flat earth has not been a thing for long enough that any realistic science can be done on that. So all I have to go on is what happens as a result of child abuse if someone is in fact taken from the home. What harm is caused in the foster care system? Because to me, it only makes sense to say that unless the effects of the abuse are going to be worse than the likely outcome from the foster care system, that behavior probably should not be treated as child abuse per se on its own. It might be a contributing factor, like I said. So first I want to get into a few of the statistics. Now these statistics are coming from educational and employment outcomes of adults formerly placed in foster care, results from Northwest Foster Care Alumni Study, Pecora et al. From Science Direct, published in April 2007. However, I've looked up several other papers, and all of them generally corroborate that these are reasonable outcomes, so I'm not going to cite every single statistic that I could find. But approximately 34% of foster care children change schools 7 to 9 times while they're in foster care, and the rest do it less than that, but all of them do it on average more than twice. 30% do it more than 10 times. So we're talking, 64% of children in foster care end up changing schools 7 or more times. 40% change placement in the foster care system 1.23 times per year. That's changing your entire household, who you're living with, who the adults taking care of you are, who the foster siblings around you are. When adults leave the foster care system, only 33% of them have managed to get a driver's license. Only 38% of them have $250 or more US in cash to their name. 32% of children in the foster care system report maltreatment in the foster care system. 22% of adults who exit the foster care system will be homeless within a year. 33% of them end up living below the poverty level, including their entire household, whichever one they move into. That household will be below the poverty level. The results of the foster care system are atrocious. They have significantly lower rates of college graduation. They have somewhat lower rates of high school graduation. Children are not routinely, but not infrequently, lost in the system. There are many children, no one knows where they are. So the question is teaching someone these absurdly stupid and harmful things, yes, worse than that? Do we really think that just teaching your kid that the earth is flat is going to result in an over 1 in 5 chance of your kid becoming homeless within a year of becoming an adult? I would need to see some evidence for that. And because stats and evidence are great for making a scientific point or a sociological point, that's great, and that's why I've used some of these statistics, but they're not super great for giving someone the core of the story. And so I also want to tell a story that was related to me by a friend of mine who, in fact, adopted several children from the foster care system. And I want to tell one story in particular. He and his wife had adopted a 4.5-year-old child who had been with 10 different families, including one that had been a failed adoption up to that point. And this child was only 4.5. Imagine switching not just your home, but your family 10 times by the time you were 4.5. this child was playing on the floor in the living room during the social worker's final visit. And the adoption had been going well. The child was happy. My friend and his wife were happy. Things seemed to be going all right. And the social worker told them that they should expect this to be her last visit because it looked like everything was good and she was going to sign off completely on the adoption. But she needed to tell the kid that. So she said to the kid, "Hey, kid's name, I'm keeping this anonymous. I had to discuss something with you after this." That kid went into a panic, ran out of the room into the farthest room he could find, which happened to be the kitchen, and pressed himself against the wall as hard as he could while crying. Because what he thought was about to happen was that he was going to switch homes again. I have a hard time thinking that that's going to be something that results from telling your kid a stupid thing like the earth is flat. And I happen to be someone who was taught some really stupid stuff as a kid. I was a young earth creationist. That's almost as stupid as the earth being flat. And yeah, I believe there were a whole bunch of scientists lying to me. But you know what? None of the young earth creationists that I know had even close to a 22% chance of experiencing homelessness within a year of becoming an adult. And so, if we're going to say that per se, teaching your kid flat earth is child abuse, not just that it can contribute to child abuse, but that it is child abuse on its own, I want to see some really good evidence that the results of this are worse than the results of removing a child. Because that's what child abuse is. It's the things that can get your children taken away. Now, don't get me wrong. It doesn't mean that if you do something that's child abuse, your child is going to be taken away immediately. There is a system of escalations and check-ins with social services and things that have to happen, right? But ultimately, if the behavior from the parent that constitutes child abuse persists, that is the remedy. And I don't think it's fair to say that the remedy for teaching your child that the earth is flat should ever be subjecting them to the foster care system. Now, these numbers are in fact for the US. However, everything I could find said that they were similar in other developed countries like Canada, the UK, various European countries. In fact, the story I told was not from a US foster care system. So that is my concern, is that if we actually decide as a society that this is child abuse per se, that we will be subjecting children to even worse circumstances. Now, I also want to say, I know that a number of flat earthers who teach their children flat earth are also child abusers in ways that do not involve the flat earth. I think we all remember when Nathan Oakley decided to physically abuse a child on stream. But that is child abuse that is not the same thing as teaching your child flat earth. If Nathan Oakley had been teaching his child excellent high-level science, but also beating his child, that would still be child abuse. And it might be that his teaching of flat earth is contributing to his abuse of that child, but it's not the same thing. And so that is just my entire argument. Yes, it is bad. No, it should not happen. Yes, it can contribute to child abuse, but on its own, I do not think it is child abuse, primarily because I do not see good reason to think that it is going to result in worse outcomes than the remedy for child abuse, which is ultimately, if it persists, removal from the home and placement into a foster care system. And that is me. I'm done.
Bye.